Thank you so much for being here this evening. I've been anxious for this night to get here. Tonight is a special night. I have with me as my guest Brother Matt Dundon and his wife Colleen, and they are church planters to the deaf in Philadelphia. You cannot miss a moment of their presentation tonight because you're not going to hear words, you're going to read words on the screen. And it's a powerful, captivating presentation. So you'll see a missionary presentation, then you'll hear them interviewed. And that's when I want you to start, even now, to put questions in the comment section where you're watching. But I want you to put your questions down, and we will have them read to Brother Dundon. His wife is translating off camera, and she will translate the questions for us, just like we do every other night. And we'll get you answers to those questions that you post. And in just a moment, you'll see this presentation. I've seen it. I know you'll be blessed. Thank you so much, Brother Dundon, for that presentation. I am struck by the fact of that verse. It haunts my mind to realize God does not want an obstacle for the deaf. And I am glad that you are a missionary with our missions agency and are going to reach the deaf. Tonight, as I ask questions for my viewers, I want you to know that Mrs. Colleen Dundon is behind the camera and she is holding their baby and signing for Brother Matt. So this is just real. We're not after some professional thing, we're just real. And so tonight I'm going to ask questions of Brother Dundon, and then I want you to put your questions in the comment box. If you're watching in a live stream, someone will get them to us. If you're on my personal page, or Worldwide's page or YouTube, we'll see those questions, but get them in there to us. Brother Matt, when did you know you could do nothing else but be a missionary to the deaf in Philadelphia? Tell me about that moment.
Sure. I graduated from Bible college, and I knew that the Lord had burdened me to establish a deaf church somewhere within the United States. My pastor and I discussed, the big cities that really need a deaf church. They don't have one. Some don't even really have deaf ministries. So we prayed over multiple cities, and truly I had never prayed for Philadelphia because that's my hometown. So after long time in prayer, I was visiting family up in Philadelphia, and we were driving back. We were on 95, and there's a place on 95 where you can look out and it just looks over the entire cityscape. And it was that moment the Lord really just hit me. This is where I want you to establish a church, in this city. So I knew, it's funny, I'm deaf, I know, but it was just so loud and clear from the Lord. Just in that moment, I went ahead and accepted what I knew the Lord was telling me to do. And after that, I did, start looking for federal jobs to transfer up to Philadelphia. My home currently is right outside Washington, D.C. in Maryland. And so I was looking, I found several opportunities up there. But after I spoke with some pastors from the Philadelphia area, they said, I told them, these are my plans, what to do. And they said, well, when you're ready to come up, let us know and we'll support you. And so from there, just started reconsidering the way that God wanted us to get up there. So I went ahead and left my full-time job. Our goal now is just to focus fully on ministry. We've got Peace from the Lord as full-time missionaries, church planters to Philadelphia. And from there, I started looking for a mission board and found Worldwide.
And we are glad you did. Thank you so much. I wonder if you could describe to me in simple terms, what is it like to have a burden from God for the deaf in Philadelphia? What is that like?
When you look at the deaf community, you just see a lot of spiritual deprivation there. In almost all areas throughout America, there are no deaf churches where the deaf community can go and hear the word of God directly in their own language, in American Sign Language. A lot of times, even within an hour's drive, there's no deaf church there. Off the top of my head, I can only think of about 10 deaf churches that are independent fundamental Baptist churches out there. And that's for the entirety of the United States. So I am very blessed. I have the privilege, the great benefit of having a deaf church, my sending church. And I've been serving there for over 10 years now. So my burden is to establish a copy of that up in Philadelphia as well. And Lord willing, as a result of that, see more deaf churches being planted in other cities.
What a wonderful thing. And what tragic omission we've made in missions to have a significant section of our population unreached without a church. And the fact that you've submitted to go is an incredible encouragement to me, if there are 350, 330, 350 million people in America, do you know what the national statistics of deaf are? The population of deaf?
So, just to let you know, there is no statistic because there is no census question that says, "Are you deaf?" So, the best estimate that we've come up with, just as a conservative estimate, is you take the general population and then multiply it by 0.1%. And that would mean for the entirety of the United States, you say 300 million, there would probably be maybe I'd say about 30,000 deaf throughout the United States, give or take, maybe less,
Mhm.
but not a specific number.
I appreciate you helping us understand that and to realize that we have that many people, the size of a county out west, the size of a town in the Midwest, 30,000 or more. And that's probably super conservative to realize have no way to hear the gospel unless somebody goes to reach them. When you look ahead 10 years, Brother Matt, what do you dream that your ministry will look like?
Lord willing, we will have a fully self supporting deaf church, um,
Mhm.
independent, autonomous, and be able to teach deaf people about the gospel to help them to grow in the Lord, and to be able to have a greater relationship with Him. And then,
Mm.
Lord willing, as a result of that, to see more deaf churches being established as well.
Mm. I remember from your video, you said that you were 16 years old before you heard the gospel, and it took your friend about a year to tell you, for you to believe the message of your friend. I wonder how many more Matt Dundons there are out there that have not heard, that cannot hear, unless someone learns their language and goes to them. And then to think of how exceptional it is that Mrs. Dundon made herself available for a people group and God brought the two of you together is an exceptional thing. And I rejoice that you're missionaries with Worldwide New Testament Baptist Missions. Viewers, I want you to put your comments
Amen.
in the question. And I want you to share with me what's on your heart, what excites you about Brother Dundon being there. Mackenzie Case, my favorite person ever from Gant Street Baptist Church. Philadelphia is multicultural. Would you need to know sign language for other languages such as Spanish or even regional?
So, as far as other languages, not so much. American Sign Language is very commonly used all over America. Even when other deaf immigrants move here, they tend to learn American Sign Language pretty quickly. Sometimes they'll
Mhm,
bring some of their own signs, but in general, it's American Sign Language.
mhm. Brother Les Kelly is asking, will you be very specific in your just your outreach to deaf people, or are you going to reach out to the hearing if a door is open?
So if the opportunity presents itself, of course we will take it. But my primary focus is to the deaf people, to be seeking them out. And also, of course, if they have children, my son is hearing, so we already have to minister to hearing relatives as well. So we'll be ministering to them too.
Wonderful. Michelle Tao out in Vancouver or in British Columbia asks, how can we reach the deaf in our communities?
The best way is to learn American sign or to learn sign language.
Hmm.
So Canada, I believe, uses pretty similar to American Sign Language. Um, Even though they speak French in some areas, a lot of times it's very similar to American Sign Language, being that close together. But learn that their language, and then you'll be able to reach them.
You know, language is the key for every single people group there is. Learn their language and it's a door opener to their culture. And then at that point, you've lowered the threshold. Michelle, I'm so proud of you for asking that question, because it's one thing to watch the presentation and say, wow, there's a lot of needs there. It takes great character to be able to say, oh, what do I do next? And I appreciate so much, Michelle, you asking that question. Nora Dietrich, way out in the Solomon Islands, is asking, what do you foresee being one of the biggest obstacles you will face as you plant the church?
Well, I would say some of the opportunities in the deaf communities also have obstacles. So, obviously, the deaf community is very small. So, news travels really fast. So, that's a good thing. That can also be a bad thing. People hear, they know about the church, and that comes both good and bad, spread very quickly. So, to be able to reach out with people, um, any negatives get spread too. So,
Yes.
so that's one obstacle to consider.
Okay. Well, that's quite helpful. What has COVID-19 done with the deaf community?
Well, on the positive side, for the first time in history, all 50 states have interpreters with their press conferences. So that's been a huge blessing. And not only here, I've seen that in other countries as well that are starting to pick up on the need for an interpreter. There are some unique challenges as well. I have seen on Facebook some of my deaf friends that are complaining as they're trying to communicate with other hearing, when they go out to the store, when they meet with them, the different workers that they may come across. And there's social distancing, and then there's masks on, and both of those make it pretty hard to read facial expressions and to lip read if you can. So that's a little bit frustrating. And a few, I think at least one or two I've heard about deaf people who have passed away from coronavirus. So our community has been impacted in that regard as well. Just a challenging thing if they're at the hospital, because with all of the restrictions, people can't go in to visit. Sometimes it's hard to get interpreters as well. So, yeah.
Well, thank you for those answers. Dina Fitzpatrick says, Matthew, Colleen, and Aiden are our babies. Is there a sign language that a one-handed person can learn? Noting her question, she's one-handed. Is there a sign language that she can learn? Can she do it in one hand?
Yes, you can, Miss Dina. We know one person who is an amputee, and he signs with just one arm. He is clear and able to be understood. So you can too.
Wow. That's wonderful. Melody Lee is asking, will you partner first with a hearing church first, or just start the deaf church right away?
We are planning to just establish a deaf church, but in Philadelphia, we have 3 different hearing churches that have offered us the opportunity to use their space at the beginning.
Oh, wow.
So just praying how the Lord would lead as far as what options he places before us. Rent our own place, use one of their places. We're still just in prayer for that as we get closer to being on the field.
Well, sure. And Rebecca Shope is asking, and this is going to be a question that I want to quantify first. When a missionary goes on deputation, generally speaking, the husband calls churches and asks to speak to the pastor or at least the church secretary, and they say, I have a ministry, can I present my need? But Rebecca Shope is thinking through this. She's saying, how does it work with you guys? How does the deputation process work for Matt and Colleen?
So yes, that was definitely a challenge. I call less than I would say the average missionary does. But God is still filling our schedule. So I start out with texting pastors who I knew,
Hmm.
and just go that way and go to conferences and try to meet with pastors in person so they're familiar with me. And then when I do that, I tend to type everything up in my phone, or I have my wife next to me and we meet with a pastor. I'll just show him what I have in my phone. Hello, my name is Matt Dundon. I'm a missionary, etc. And introduce myself and then give him my prayer card and ask if he's interested with scheduling a visit with the church. So most of the time, pastors have received me very well. We exchange contact information, and then it's a lot easier to get in touch. Or sometimes they schedule on the spot. But when I do call, I open with, just to let you know, I'm a missionary. I'm speaking through an interpreter, and this is not my voice. And then we go ahead and have a conversation. So try to keep it short. But
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. And Rebecca, thank you so much for that question as well. It helps people think of the peculiar aspect of things, of how to make it work. But what's so precious is to realize that so many people are receptive to you and that you're able to communicate and get the job done and raise your support. I praise the Lord for that. Another question from the Solomon Islands. What is a way we can pray for your family right now?
well, for right now, uh, as every missionary is on deputation, we are staying home. So if you could just pray about that God would open the door for us to be able to travel soon. We had meetings since mid-March through this month. Of course, all have been canceled thus far. So um, that's the greatest prayer request, that we could just reschedule with them.
Amen. Thank you for asking that, Nora. And it's true for all missionaries on deputation. We have 15, 18 families on deputation right now with Worldwide, many of whom will be in this online conference. And all we're saying is missions is out here. Keep praying for your missionaries. And questions like we're getting tonight are the ones that remind us what is happening with our missionaries, specifically tonight, what's happening with missionaries to the deaf. I have another question for my friend Lloyd. Lloyd is asking, what are some outreach methods that you will use to find the deaf in Philadelphia?
Just like you have door to door visitation, we use what we call address to address visitation. So drive to a
Okay.
house, ring the bell, drive to the next place. So obviously, there are less places that you can reach out to in the same amount of time, but um, the other great opportunity is deaf events, to visit those, and also to host our own events, and have the gospel presented at those events as well.
Mm, that's wonderful. And I still probably have time for another question or two if you want to get your question in. But what excites you about being a missionary, Brother Matt?
Really just excited at the opportunity itself. Um,
Mm,
when I left my job last year to start, full time on missions, it was such a relief, just
mhm.
happy to be able to serve full time. There's nothing better than that.
Oh. And what could someone do to come and be a help to you on your mission field?
Well, if they know American Sign Language, they could do a lot of things for sure. So
Mhm.
if
Start with the
they
language.
don't know American Sign Language, there's still contributions that can be made to missions as well.
Mm. Well, I know Matt will be in the comments section along with Colleen afterward, and they'll be getting to some of your questions that we may not get to right away, and they'll go through and be available to you. But Matt, what was your job before deputation? What were you doing?
I was a legal assistant for the Food and Drug Administration. I was working in their law office.
That's wonderful. And God's taken you, and now you work for Him full time. And that's exciting as well. Are there discouraging things about being a missionary?
Well, I would say so far it's been such a big blessing to me.
Mm,
Um, Sometimes the burden itself is discouraging. I really want to be there. So I'm looking forward to that time, and
yes.
I've heard so far of two deaf people who have passed away in Philadelphia since we started full-time deputation.
Mm,
So,
mm. May that stay on our minds for a long time. Matt, thank you so much for teaching us about your faith and your walk with God and this place that He's called you. And thank you for being with me tonight. Now, friends, it's Friday night. That means we won't meet again until Monday at 7 o'clock. And I want you to be here. We'll show you a presentation. We'll take your questions. And then we will also answer your questions in the comments afterward as well. And I want you to join us the next time so we can show you what God is doing around the world. So, from Kings Mountain, North Carolina, tonight, I say to you, thank you for being here and good night.